Somebody got volume control on these things? Missed it. Got it?
That's test.
Check, check. That's better.
That was a buzz.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. It feels like somebody turned the heat down, but I think we're okay. That would be, thank you. It's like when my wife mixes for my band. She doesn't like me. Okay. First item on the agenda, actually the second item is approval of the agenda. Any suggestions for changes? Like eliminating number 5.
Motion to approve this.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Next item is approval of the minutes from our last meeting.
The minutes were very well taken, thank you.
They are.
Yes.
I wasn't sure.
I have a couple of things because it's traditional for me to have some. I know. Page 2, the third paragraph, about 60% of the way down, it says their highest density residential district does not have a maximum footage per unit. We're talking about square foot lots, so I think it would be a minimum. And then the next line, it says upper limits, and the next line, it says maximum again. And this is the next.
I think in that case, it's the maximum number of units.
Okay.
So can you have that?
And then this is one of my favorite corrections ever. On page 5, 2/3 of the way down, Kleinjans agrees, stating that the biggest things that are focusing on are housing, the environment, and for our current president, eggs.
I'm thinking that was ag.
I liked that.
Yeah, I like your eggs.
Down the price of eggs, it's.
So that was not an error?
We love eggs here, yeah. I think the planning commission is going to endorse eggs. That's all I had. Anybody else?
I had a couple typos, just little things. Page 2, first paragraph, the second sentence, some of the things in the zoning reform toolkit have to do with them, we're putting them more. I think we can take them out of there.
Yep.
Let's see. I had the eggs as well. I think on page 5, last paragraph in item 5, motion made by Louise to recommend the rezoning request. I think it was approval of the rezoning request, right?
We recommend approving the rezoning, yes.
Yep. It's the motion, yeah, the motion in item 5. So it's the
Which is on page 5.
Which is on page 5. Yep. Just recommending the approval of. I think that was it.
Hey, anybody else? If not, would like a motion.
Motion to approve is amended.
I'll say.
We have like 3 seconds, so take your pick. All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed? All right, thank you. And now we're on to public comment. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to make comments at this time? All right, then I'll close the public comment. And we're on to accessory dwelling units, item 5. It's an interesting topic. Do you want to introduce it or shall I just launch?
Yeah, well, I can just do a little bit, but yeah, then I would love to have you launch. This is one of the areas that we've identified as something that's likely to be a good fit for our township, at least in some areas and in some kind of way. And so the intent tonight is just to talk a little bit, really for staff to get some initial thoughts from you on what you see, what you envision, what you would like to outcomes you may like to see, things you'd like to make sure to avoid. So as we continue the conversation, this is going to be a little bit longer conversation. That's going to be part of the whole housing mix as we address that. But this is kind of just to get the ball rolling. So we'd like to leave with a little bit better understanding of where you're at walking in the door.
Yeah, so this is, current conversation is ADUs, which I think everybody is familiar with, either built in or on the same lot, increasing density. There were some, excuse me, pretty easy pickings. There's one in particular, because second dwellings aren't allowed in R1, 2, 3. Somewhere in there, it says you can't rent it out. I mean, you could rent it, but you can't rent half of it. So that's one. What we need to come up with tonight is some direction for staff, Mika and Lorna, to think about. I don't think we'll be giving enough direction to write anything. And this fits in with a whole bunch. We were watching that thing this afternoon, and it balloons pretty quickly from, let's think about ADUs, or do we allow them in the current zoning districts, or maybe we should change our zoning districts, or maybe the zoning should be done, they suggested, by housing type rather than by size of lot. So it would be a complete restructuring of the zoning ordinance, which is not what we're looking for at this point.
No, this is part of the broader missing middle conversation about housing, and I think most of you, sure, I don't know if you're new, so I don't know if you're familiar with the term yet, but the idea of that mid-size housing that's easier for entry-level people to access. And so there are quite a few different topics within that. But we're going to try to keep this part pretty limited because we think this is something that we can actually pull it off the list and check it off and make some incremental progress, even as we continue to look at these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And before I go back to you, the webinar this afternoon was really good. I thought it was very well done and just informative. It was one of the better ones we've seen. They said it was being recorded. So if you're interested, let me know and I'll send that recording to you.
Thanks. Yeah, if there's a link, I'd like to watch it.
We'll get it in about a week. They usually send it out usually a week after the webinar date. So, yep.
So approach on this is we could try to do ADUs as a whole, but even that, I think maybe we can break it down a little more than that and maybe do some incrementals just on this. But I want to get everybody's feel on it, and then maybe I'll give a little direction. To me, in ADUs, you can break them up. It's an internal one, which to me doesn't change the footprint of the house. So you're renting out the upstairs or the basement, or not renting, but somebody lives there, like in your house.
Unofficially.
Yeah. Well, you're not renting it.
No, we're not.
I am either. So that's one. You don't change the footprint. The other is you take the house and you change the footprint by expanding, building off the back, building an addition, something like that. And the third one is a separate dwelling unit, which to me is, I would divide it into those three. I don't know if it's worth it, but that's how I see it. And if you're thinking of separate ones, I keep seeing things about changing dimensions on setbacks and so on, so that they seem to be considering, like if you go to separate ADU, that you would get the same setbacks as a garage, something like that. So you don't have to have a 40-foot rear yard on your ADU. And some of those are those dimensional things are things we're going to have to look at. You're going to have to look at.
We're gonna have to look at.
So maybe we could, if it makes sense, can we kind of take turns going down and kind of getting your picture of what you see it as, kind of your image of it, and how you think we might approach.
And if you have
Wait.
questions or things that you'd like to know more about that we can bring to you, that would be helpful too.
Yes.
Cool.
So Tom, go ahead.
Oh, sure, I'll start. I agree. First of all, I agree with Mika. I think the webinar today was terrific. And I think it supplements all the other document, which Mika, you shared, I thought was terrific as well. Unfortunately, my packet just got there a little bit late, so I had a chance to jump through it actually yesterday. But I think, one question when I was going through this, and there's a lot of options, and there's a lot of, as they put it in the presentations today, offenders to ADUs, and I copied a few of the slides as we were going through it. But I think allowed uses is one of those. Do you allow it by right? That's kind of the first question. The second is density standards. The third is lot size minimums, and then setbacks and parking. So those were kind of 5 areas where townships that have gone through this typically find that those are the initial barriers they have to kind of work through. I was thinking about this when I was going through all this material, kind of in the context of my career in introducing new products. And Stephanie, you can probably recognize this as well. When you introduce something new, you have to decide if you want to make it more you want to be more accommodative to it, to be able to put more behind it, to be able to make it successful. If you treat it like all the other things that you have out there going on, it doesn't get the attention and it doesn't grow and launch the way you typically want it to. So I think one of the questions we would want to have is, do we want to be more accommodative to this approach than we are with our traditional zoning around single family? And I think if we are, that helps us kind of walk through some of these pieces. I think the concept of this, and Dave, you went through the 3 different, basically internal, attached, and detached. I think a lot of it does have to do with, I think a lot of it for us is going to be lot size. Because we do have we have some, obviously in R1, we have some really large lots that could accommodate potentially detached properties if they wanted to do something with this. But I think fundamentally for us, if we think about how do we want to treat this? How do we want to support it? I think obviously education, communications to the community is going to be a big part of that. But if we do want to make it a bit more accommodative than we have our existing zoning, that might be a starting point for us to think about. Okay.
Yeah, my first thought was my kids are gonna take over my house and shove me in the basement. Yeah, this is kind of a new topic for me. I didn't get to participate in the webinar, but I guess it comes back to what do we really want to do in Park Township? I mean, do we want more population? Do we want this middle housing? We talked a while back about affordable housing, and you're talking mobile homes and stuff like that. Not attractive. Nobody wants it in their neighborhood. And that's going to kind of be like some of the stuff we ran into with the STRs. It's like, I don't want that in my neighborhood. There's going to be extra cars. There's going to be extra people, all this kind of stuff. You're going to have the same arguments. I think there is a real need. I mean, you look at the houses that are being built, and they're not attainable for most people. And in order to keep a sustaining population in the area, I think you need to bring in families and that kind of thing. So I've got a lot to think about yet before I really land on what direction I think we'd like to go. But
I'm with Dave. First question that I ask myself is, how does this help us to meet our goals, our township? And clearly it should be aligned to our goals. And I know that infill is one of the things that we talk about. So to me, that makes sense. Then I have the second question, well, how do you effectively infill? Because I think these 3 options all have different impacts on the visibility. I know of some families. So there are a lot of people who have aging parents. And I understand what it's very costly to take care of aging parents. And so I think about that and we have an aging population in Park Township. So to me, there's something that says that's interesting to look at. I think larger acres, larger parcels are less impact to other people when you have, when it's detached, it's a whole different thing. If it's, you know, 1 and 2, if it's contained within or go above a garage or something like that, it's not as visible. I think that would really stir up people a lot. So to me, it makes sense, but you know, can we ease into it? And you know, I think, you know, just building it above or below or something where you don't change the footprint doesn't really impact neighbors that much. And so, you know, do you ease into something like that way? But the whole detached thing is going to be a whole other can of worms to deal with. So I think it's worth looking into. I think we need to clearly define how this supports our goal and how we think it'll be accepted by the community and how do we take the first initial steps, but don't go too deep.
It's almost harder to go when you're like nearing the end of the line. Come up with something that hasn't been, yeah, I was gonna say that hasn't been said. Well, yeah, so I absolutely think that there's you know, certainly value for the community. All valid points about the, you know, impact and the particular areas, you know, taking into consideration the impact to um, you know, the neighbors, but also you know, thinking strategically about the space that we do have. Right. You said looking at infill, planning there. I would also, you know, as we explore, perhaps, you know, reviewing our existing zoning and seeing if we can make a modification to be more friendly towards ADUs. Um, I saw this and also was thinking adjacently to, keep thinking to that development, Central and 16th downtown Holland. You know, where because our zoning doesn't allow for that type of development either, where we're looking at, you know, the infill and you know, how do we get creative with that space? If we are evaluating our zoning, do we start with ADUs and then can we expand it to also you know, explore that type of development as well to kind of use this as our stepping stone as a, you know, potential future. It certainly is my opinion, and there'll be varying opinions, you know, across the community. But I find that that particular development and that style as something that I think would really be a nice fit for infill also within Park Township. So leveraging the ADUs as, you know, kind of that path to you know, something similar or along those lines to at least be something that we could entertain, I think is also beneficial.
So reading through all the documentation, I was initially excited because I've got the aging parents and I'm trying to figure out, it's gonna reach a point they can't stay where they're at. And it's already to the point where I can't stand driving 3 hours twice a week to go check on them. And I don't have a carriage house to convert. Some of these are very interesting concepts, and I'm trying to envision what in the world different areas of Park Township would be able to accommodate something like this. With the enthusiasm and excitement with regard to that, we're just coming off short-term rentals, and I have a huge gasp. And I'm like, let's really think that through because we don't want short-term rentals, and this could very, very easily turn right back into that. So that is a major concern of mine regarding these. One question, Mika, have we received any requests from residents to start doing items like this?
Yeah, we're not getting requests, or I don't think we've gotten requests in the sense of somebody saying, please take up ADU ordinance evaluation. What we get is somebody coming and saying, my kids are living with me and I need them to be not in my hair. Or my mom is moving in. This one is before the ZBA. My mom is moving in and we're trying to figure out how we're going to make this work. That's really the one that we're seeing the most of, is people with aging parents who are trying to figure out how to accommodate them, or they have multi-generational housing and they want them to be able to maintain some level of independence, but still want them to be close. And because housing prices are so high, can't afford to buy them something small nearby or put them into the sort of supportive facility that they might have been able to do 10 or 15 years ago. So that's really where it's coming from, is that this is the one thing specifically that we've heard that we see in the building department when applications come in. I share your concern about short-term rentals, and I don't want any more to deal with than we currently have. And so I do think that's something we need to bear in mind very carefully, being realistic about what our enforcement capacity is and what we're able to do.
Correct.
When that, as far as that goes.
All right, great. Thanks for that answer. No, that was it for right now.
I have. I think the easiest one I mentioned, which is just saying you can have a separate apartment in your single family home. That seems like a no-brainer. And that would allow for any of the modifications inside when you know expansion right now. Most of those would be limited because on big lots, houses are built to the envelope, and you might not have any space. You know, if somebody could, and this will be the question. Like the discussion the other day, my lot is big enough I could expand my house out without getting in, while still be staying inside the limits. So is that seems relatively easy, but still. Right, and in my mic on, it still looks like a house, is part of a house, isn't something else, it's just a bigger house. So that one seems relatively easy. The separate ones, as I think a couple of people mentioned, that gets iffy because of setbacks, side yard setbacks, appearances, and you get into the whole, and we haven't struggled with it here, but I did previously, and the zoning board does, outbuildings. Everybody always wants a bigger one. Always, no matter how big you make it. So you'd be fighting that also. That's one to think about. There were in this handout, is this the one with the picture on the front? Yes. There are some nice, this one I emailed the other night, a couple nights ago. A lot of examples from Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, Detroit, Howland, Traverse City, Kalamazoo, on what they've done. But I think this is really worth it, and that's like on the second and third page. So those are really worth looking at. Somebody mentioned the buy rates, that's good. The numerical limits on how big can it be, how big can the house be, how big is your rear yard setback, your front, your side, how many square feet might one of these things be? Those are all things you're going to have to think about. One of the big things that kept coming up in the thing we saw today and comes up every time we do anything is parking. We live in a place where you have to have cars. And that's some of the big houses in Tiffany Shores have 2-stall garages. They're 5-bedroom houses with a 2-stall garage. And it's like, what were these people thinking? When, you know, they're going to be children, they're going to grow up, they're going to need cars. That's what it is. So that parking is going to be a big issue. Park outside. Yeah, get out of my way. And while you're at it, clean your, yeah. Another question that came up, so it's, you know, it was kind of what's the goal? And then what do we do in the ordinance to achieve those goals? And then the third thing is what are the uses? And some of the places here require an owner on site. There's going to be a big, over time, maybe the first one is for mom. But in 10 years, when mom's gone, these people sell, somebody's going to buy it and want to rent it. It's not going to be for family. That's what's going to be the long term. And kind of like STRs, the house is worth more to an investor to buy it rent out the whole house and rent out the ADU or rent out the house and the upstairs, just like houses in town are more valuable if you have two rental units. So that's another thing to keep in mind is that in short-term rentals, by the way, I read an article which from to Mika that Barcelona made illegal short-term rentals, 66,000 of them.
Wow.
In one fell swoop, illegal. And if we are doing things like you gotta have an owner living there, you don't have STRs or you're renting, then how much regulation and administrative overhead are you gonna need to do inspections and make sure they're safe and all that kind of thing. So I think there's some things we can do pretty quickly and easily. But the bigger ones are gonna take some thinking.
Great points.
One thing that I might add. So I know we're doing a lot of condo associations with the new developments and we're a part of a condo association. And ours is very clearly written that only one family unit can live in.
Mhm.
So I know, so those exist out there, which whatever we do may not apply to them.
Right, it won't.
Yeah.
Because that overrides. Yeah, same in ours.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe it's not, but you've heard me mention income inequality multiple times. People who are wealthy with more money will be more likely to add on to their house or build a separate one. And then if they can rent it, then they have more money in it. It's like,
Yeah.
it's kind of how life is, but I like to keep those things in mind.
That's a good point. I think we're trying to find a workable, fitting, appropriate approach to try to help the housing situation here that doesn't, again, we had this conversation the other night as well, that doesn't encroach on agricultural land, right? It's sort of the ultimate infill when you really think about it.
Right.
Because you're only talking about people's existing properties, existing lots. But it is going to require some changes. I had the same concern when I was reading this about STRs. Maybe there's a way, and I don't know if a charter can be created around these or some type of will there be a licensing? I mean, there's so many things that go into this. My head was just kind of made a lot of notes as I was reading it all. But the licensing, is there going to be a licensing piece? Is there going to be an inspection process? Is there going to be, again, if there's a homeowners association, that's going to drive, as I think was pointed around condominiums, right? So, I guess one of the other things that I noticed, I made a note around, which was kind of looking at potential partnerships. You've got, there was one section here that was, well, this piece it was co-sponsored by AARP. So a lot of it was focused around what's happening with aging family members. But one thought too is that there's other organizations that are doing creative things with housing, Habitat being an example. One of the things that came up in today's presentation was a pilot program. Coming up with ideas and concepts and then finding a property or finding, and I think they suggested looking at property that might be owned by the township or city to be able to create a pilot environment and kind of test out some of the things that we're thinking.
Just take a chunk off the corner here.
Well, I think the soccer field is going to become parking. So that probably is out, but I mean, it wouldn't have to be that. But it was one thing. I think the concept of maybe creating a pilot approach and maybe finding a developer that's willing to try that. I do think the detached property is going to be an expensive one for most people, even if they have the space.
Talking about a tiny home village.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of different designs in here that, they talk about carriage houses, but the first house I lived in after I graduated from college was in the DC area. And it actually was the property that was originally the house, I guess you'd call it a carriage house, but the folks that took care of the people in the main house that lived in this one. And it was a very small little place, which is where you live in right after you graduate from college and you don't have any money. But it worked out for us. And it was a little place that actually still had the concrete walkway to the other house. So that, you know, that was a small house, but there's a lot of different designs that are kind of laid out in here that could be options. Again, I think, you know, Dave, like you mentioned, there's so much in here. I'm still getting my head around what it might look like, but I think there's a lot of good suggestions and recommendations in here.
Any questions popping in that Mika can do some research on and maybe answer? I still, some point, gonna have to look through and find out where it actually says you can't rent out part of your house.
I think that's included in the definition of single family.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to get off topic. But one of the things that's not ADUs, but speaking of small houses and dimensions, allowing smaller lots with smaller houses, like 800 square foot houses or 1,000 square foot, like all the ones that were built after World War II.
Like the one I grew up in,
Mhm.
900 square feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first one I had built.
Yeah. So I mean, that's not ADUs, but it's kind of like, because it's dimension
I
problems.
think there's more pushback on builders. Don't want to build little houses because they're not going to make money.
Exactly,
Absolutely.
exactly. That's it.
So maybe a starting builder or something would.
Yeah.
Want to, you know, that's like a remodel. Do you make money on a remodel? They must, because they do it. You know, they're expensive. Easier to start from new than to tear down and rebuild.
One of the things they talked about today was smaller local builders that aren't developing large communities of homes. And finding somebody that has expertise in additions and building smaller places. So I don't know what I don't know what that looks like here, because we have a lot of big houses and most of the things that we're presented with are larger homes. But that is, you know, that I think that's an opportunity for, you know, I mean, it comes down to a cost element, right? And it's difficult to make money on smaller homes, but if you're starting to build a business around that model, it might be an option.
Mhm.
You can scale your business appropriately on that. So
And if we can't find somebody around here, maybe somebody up north of Grand Rapids is willing to come down or anywhere else.
I'll recall we had a request a few months ago to build some small houses just off Wakazu Drive there, and we shot it down. And if you recall the public comment, nobody wanted it in their neighborhood. And that was my comment after everybody made their comments, like, you know, this is in our master plan, but not in my neighborhood. So
Right.
we've got to bear that in mind too.
Okay.
It's like STRs. It's like, I don't want, you know, I mean, I don't care if it's in my neighborhood. I mean, somebody's got their parents living there, something like that. That's fine with me.
yeah,
I'll probably end up in that situation someday.
Well, it's-
So, I mean, if another opportunity like that came up, and that was more or less infill, that was
I thought it was ideal.
Yeah, I thought it was
So-
ideal too, but if I recall, I was the only one that voted for it, and everybody else shot it down.
I think the challenge is, again, revisiting our zoning and seeing what changes we can make. Because in that particular opportunity, with the request, technically any option in R5 is an option. And not every one of those would be a good fit for that location. And so none of our zoning currently allows really having multiple individual units, right? So that's why when I see this and thinking about how we think about our zoning overall and maybe using this as a stepping stone before we go full on into a development like that, because I still feel like that's not something I would mind in my neighborhood. It still has the feel. It's just smaller, but it's the same community and
It's
neighborhood
community,
feel,
right,
right?
right,
And it
exactly.
doesn't have, you know, the massive tall buildings. It's not, you know, the townhouse feeling. It is still neighborhood feel at a smaller scale. And I think that that's kind of my mental block when I was asking about that opportunity, right? I'm like, if it's something like this, I think it's fabulous. But when the zoning requests are just to change it and we don't have zoning that really accommodates that kind of request to begin with,
Yeah.
If I
that's where I get a
remember,
little uncomfortable.
if I remember correctly, that parcel, they weren't suggesting that they were gonna build small houses to sell to people. It was, they wanted to build little tiny cottages to constantly rent out. So that
Long term.
Yeah.
doesn't have a neighborhood feel to
Mhm.
me as
Mhm.
opposed to, here's a home that you own. And if it's 900 square feet, that's your home that you own and it's not a revolving door.
Right.
Right. Again, that's one of my things is I like people to be able to buy in and build wealth rather than paying rent for the rest of their lives. There was some of the comments in that thing today I thought were interesting and I hinted at it earlier, rewriting zoning. They did it more by use than by size. So in this zone, you can have a quadplex, but you can build it to look like a house. They have limits on the height and the size and all that kind of stuff, so that you're not saying this is R1, it's just, this is on this size lot, you can do this kind of use. I'm a little unclear on that, on how to structure it, but they were restructuring by use, as I recall.
Yeah, it was interesting. One of the things that they delineated is they suggested that you kind of separate was not just, we tend to say you can have single family, you can have duplex, you can have multifamily, but multifamily, like you were just talking about, can mean a whole lot of different things. So
Right.
really define, do you want to allow cottage courts? Do you want to allow courtyard apartments? Do you want to allow large apartment buildings? But to break that down a little bit more, so you're saying what you actually want in that. And then it talked more about form-based things. Our zoning ordinance, I was kind of pleased to look at that, does actually reflect that language where it's talking about a maximum height and number of stories. So it's 2.5 stories and 35 feet. And so the idea is your massing is going to be as big, and it kind of gives that feel. So it talked a little bit about the form of the structure. Some of that was included, and then just breaking down the different types of multifamily housing a little bit more. So I think that's a great thing to look at.
Yeah, it's the form of the house, not how the house is used.
Right, like, cause it can look the same and have four apartments for, four apartments for four single people or about that size, or it can have one family. So it would be, like, yeah, it was breaking it down more form based.
Yeah.
That's one of the suggestions.
I think that the form makes a difference, and every time I drive by Beeline and I think that's Phelps that goes across there, kind of back behind Lowe's, there's a development right on the corner. Small units
Mhm.
done really, really well. They don't look like a lot of the other buildings that you see. And literally, I mean, I could see something like that in Park Township. The scale is right. It's done very well. It's affordable.
Mhm.
But to me, it can't be what a lot of developers come in and do. And I don't know how we put some sort of guidelines around something as we approach that topic of this mixed use. So to me, there's an opportunity, but we're going to be really, we need to be very specific on what we're looking for.
Yeah.
That was a Habitat for Humanity development,
Mhm.
so they weren't concerned about profit and stuff like that. The developer wasn't.
Yeah.
And by taking one lot and putting multiple units on it, they actually reduced the cost for the homeowners.
I think of just looking back at duplexes that were done 30 years ago and how terrible that they look.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, nobody wants those.
I think people have that fear, if this goes in 30 years down the road, this is what it's gonna look like, and it's just like, so how do you, there's an aesthetic in the maintenance and then it's even how you build it into these small houses in the community or walking paths, or, I mean, that's how. I know we can do it, but it has to be done right.
So if I may, because I think I understand the term form-based better. Form-based is what it looks like
Yeah.
on the how big, what it looks like. So rather than you can only have a single family home. So then that allows all different uses that look the same and kind of fit together, and you can have multifamilies and singles and duplexes. And I think that's a really useful approach. And I think you hit a nail right on the head with our current zoning and how it is really limits us, because we've all had that same fear. If we allow this, then it's out of our control. We got nothing. So I think changing that would be really powerful.
I was, one of the things they talked about both in the packet that we got earlier and also today was pre-designed options. Kind of pre-planned, and this is mostly in the detached environment, where you actually would have a set of plans essentially that would already be pre-approved and laid out. I think in terms of if detached is something that we would consider including in this, is we could, you know, I guess this could be written where it would be internal and attached initially. I mean, there's probably a few ways we could look at this. But if the detached units would be part of this, you know, that may be one way to kind of manage it, is to have a few pre-approved that would be, I guess it would also help fast track the opportunities. If we, you know, didn't go through the process of having to have everyone individually designed.
Well, Iowa County actually released some plans.
They've created a number of those. So, and they're all, you know, relatively small. Again, you know, that was the idea behind it.
I forget that an upper limit. I think it was under 1,000 feet. Maybe it was upper limit of 800 or something like that.
I think it was 800. Yeah.
So goal, the first thing is the same. I made a motion one time on STRs at the very, I don't know who was here. Anybody? You were here. When Jeff First was chairing and we we're going along, and I made a motion that we allow more than zero.
Zero.
And everybody looked at me and was like, what? It's like, you know, or get off.
It's a starting point.
Yeah. So that's kind of my question right now, is the general feeling that we would like to allow ADUs of some form in Park Township. Which, if that's the consensus, then that gives Mika a place to start looking for what we can do.
And I should say that I don't anticipate this being something where I'll be bringing back an ordinance in a month or even 2 months. I think this is a longer conversation, so. Just wanna, you're not committing to anything big.
I think of it, crawl, walk, run.
Yeah, and I do think that there's a lot of communication that has to happen, so.
It needs to run, you know, the bigger thing that we're trying to do with, it's 1,000 years, so.
Yeah.
So the small step is in there.
Yep.
But if we don't want to allow it at all, then there's no sense going further. So that's the question for the commission here.
I'm supportive. I think it's you know, we have to figure out the best way to tailor it collectively, and but I think, you know, to Len's point, housing is one of our, you know, the gap in housing, I think, and the need for additional housing is a priority and part of our master plan. This isn't something that we're going rogue on, right?
It's in the master plan.
What's in the master plan? So I think there's alignment there. So yeah, I would be supportive.
Yeah, I'm supportive of it. I mean, truth be told, wouldn't say there's a lot of illegal events right now. I'm sure there's, you know, mother-in-law rooms and stuff like that. And I know, I don't know specifically who, but I know, you know, young adults will buy a house and rent rooms to 3 of their friends to pay the mortgage, which technically is not allowed, but how do you track that? And how, I mean, so there's a lot of that going on. So I think we need to address the internal first.
So non-conforming uses, we have to figure out how to address.
I think we need to be cognizant of what's potentially happening already as that and how it's gonna play into it. I mean, you just can't broad sweep and say, nope, just like STRs, nothing. You know?
Well, and people will be creative, and I'm already hearing again from the short-term rental, so from real estate agents.
Oh, sure, yeah.
If the township thinks that we're not gonna rent these less than 38 or 28 days, they're crazy, because we're gonna rent it, and if people leave early, well, we can't do nothing about that. We're just gonna rent it
The
again.
contract says 28 days, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, people will be creative and figure workarounds
Sure.
no matter what.
And I don't think in a situation like this, I don't think we need to force people into being creative. I think, you know, just allowing your home to be used for friends, relatives, that kind of thing, I think is a reasonable use. I think when we start getting into, you know, attachments and designing them with kitchens and stuff like that, I think that's a whole nother thing because now it's multifamily. You know, because you've really got two separate living spaces. Yeah. But I mean, if somebody's their shared space, I think that's almost a no-brainer for me.
And you're leaning towards owner occupied, so it's like somebody owns the house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you know, how many people have their kids coming back to live with them for a period of time? You know,
How many here?
Yeah.
it's a pretty good cross section, right?
I got the father-in-law.
You know,
And grandkids.
yeah, but parents and my parents are aging fast. They're getting right up there. They're in a condo now, but you know, thinking about the next step and how that looks. I think we have to allow the population to be able to live a suitable life.
Okay,
I'm supportive. Again, looking at what we can easily do within the parameters of what we have, making small changes and I think it's always good to say if we are supportive of this, what could it be in 3 years? What could it be in 10 years? What could it be in 15 years? That's kind of that crawl, walk, run. I think we should have a vision of how we very slowly start to move through this.
Well, I'll say yes, I'm very much supportive of continuing to explore this. I think it is important. The devil's gonna be in the details as we continue the conversations.
Yep.
But I think, you know, the more conversations we have, the more awareness that's out there in the community, hopefully, you know, let's start getting potentially engagement and feedback as well. You know, over a period of time, so we can, you know, take that into consideration and make things happen.
thank you. Sure.
I concur with all the comments. I don't know if it's at the right point now to put in one of our newsletters, hey, we're beginning to discuss this. What are your thoughts for our residents? You know, are they thinking about family? Are they thinking about their kids? How many asks will we get going forward?
I think that's a great question to take to the board.
You
We'll do that.
Okay, so is that,
It is, yeah, and I would say too, if there's anything else that, any other housing type items, like you had mentioned the cottage courts, which was an excellent strategic thought, and also like second on my list, so, yes. If there are any other thoughts along those lines that you're interested in, this, I have kind of a side list of putting together a strategy for what makes sense as we step through this in Park Township. So we have some things that are a little more technical. I had mentioned a while back that there's an issue with streets and private roads and a couple of our ordinances that just make standard developments a little bit more of a hassle than they should be. So there are a few different things that we can walk through on our way to do this. So if there are other things that are of interest,
yeah,
I'd love to hear those too. Yeah.
there are things on our list of minor things, but you still have to do them somewhere, fit them in.
Yeah, and some of them are just not as interesting. I mean, we don't have to have a
Right.
public engagement process for that, so. Oh, yeah, we can do the boring stuff and get the public involved in the fun stuff.
Everybody good on that for now? That's gonna be an interesting discussion. Yeah. All right, what are we up to? Other business and announcements? You have anything to say on family, agricultural farm, purchase development rights, whatever it
Well,
is?
not much to say on that. Tom and I sat in on a preliminary, and Mick also sat in on a initial meeting on farmland preservation, and it's just formative right now. We're just looking at collecting candidate information on who that panel is going to consist of and stuff like that. But yeah, one gentleman that's on there is Clifford Newsom. He's the CEO of Zealand Farm Services.
Oh, okay,
And he's worked with Ottawa County on developing that, so we've got some good expertise there.
good.
But yeah, it's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, sure.
As far as the board goes, last meeting was a working session last Thursday. I was not in attendance due to a funeral, but I did take note of items covered. The board did discuss the sheriff contract, and Sheriff Eric DeBoer was there for the discussion. The county is going to begin tracking better matrix so that they can plan their staffing accordingly. We pay a portion of Ottawa County's time, and right now the board doesn't feel as though we're getting that portion. So discussions to continue. I do want to note that working meetings, there is only discussion and there is no decisions or voting made. So just so that you guys in the public is also aware of that. There was also a presentation from the MAC Active Transportation Plan, and bike paths were discussed and suggestions for maintenance was provided, as well as a few safety concerns. So more to come on that. Week prior was our normal business meeting. And I'm happy to say that we did reappoint Dave Copenal back to the planning commission. So congratulations.
Thank
That
you.
was a small-
I'm not gonna ask a vote.
And then
It was really close, Dave.
And then also, Steve Sisson was appointed back to the Swimming Pool Authority, and Crystal Mordigan was appointed back to the ZBA. All three are very desired candidates to continue
Okay.
in their roles. And our next meeting is on June 12th.
Any other comments?
Are there any updates on the Parks and Recreation Director position and people that are applying for the open position here?
Interviews are ongoing. I want to say that they were waiting for another candidate or two, but I'm not part of that process. So that's what I heard.
Parks and Recreation?
Parks and Rec Director, yep. Interviews are ongoing. A couple other things, at the last ZBA meeting, which was just a few weeks ago, the ZBA voted on the resolution and report saying that short-term rentals as are that the interpretation, that short-term rentals are not permitted in residential areas, they basically upheld that. We expect there may be some more court action on that, so holding tight on some of that for a little bit yet. And there were several other requests as well. It was a busy meeting. We had 5 applications, which was a lot for a for us, an extra meeting kind of month. The board also at the last meeting, there's been some concern from neighbors of that are on the southwest corner of James and 160th. Their pond level has gone down kind of significantly in the course of the Blue Haven construction. And so I've been working with our engineers to figure out what the mechanisms there are. We had a meeting with a hydrogeology kind of person that was walking us through some of that as well. And they've pulled in their water people to this too, the ones who work specifically with that. And so at this point, it seems like it's not really related to the pond or the pond construction. It's more related to the dry spring that we were having and the dewatering that happened when there is utility constructed. But we're doing a little bit of extra due diligence there, just looking at the Trailview application. And so the Trailview application that you had approved in February or March had gone to the board, was approved by the board, but they didn't hold a public hearing, inadvertently skipped over that part. We know how that goes, right? So it had gone to the next, be renoticed and go on to the next agenda. And at that point, that's when some of the concerns were raised about water. So that was tabled at the last meeting. We're doing our due diligence, and then at the next meeting, we'll be presenting that and hope to have that approved, hope that is going in the direction that we want it to be, but that's.
And part of Glenn's question was interviews for my position here.
Oh, for yours here, we have applications. I think there's an initial meeting that's scheduled for early next week, and at that point, interviews will happen. The hope is that the interviews will happen early enough for the next board meeting to be reviewed there. So that that person would be at the planning commission at our next meeting. So we'll see if that timeline works, but that's the hope.
My hope is that Dave can continue until we find another person to join the planning commission, or is that not allowed?
That there are opinions on that. There are some who say that you can continue until the next person has been appointed. I think
I don't think that's what our operating rules say. I don't have them here. It says you're done after X amount of
you
time.
have a term and it's your term is over, so
Yeah,
there's.
I don't think there's anything, any caveats in there about carrying on, because then somebody might figure out a way to rent it out for 28 days, but they left in 3, so, you know. Yeah, I'm waiting for, I've spent 10 years and I'm still waiting for those darn interviews.
At any rate, my impression is that Dave's intention is to be complete tonight, and I would like to say thank you to Dave for the tremendous amount of work that you've done over the years as planning commission. I've worked with you just for the past few years, has been a tremendous chair and just wonderful to work with. So it's been a gift to me to have the opportunity to work with Dave during these last few years. So
It goes,
thank you.
yes, you're welcome. It goes both ways. Yeah, no, this is a really good group and fun group to work with and fun staff to work with. I enjoy it. Howard, it's fun to work with. We have other meetings that are fun, so it's been all great. So thank you all, and you'll do a good job, huh?
We are in other business.
Let me say a couple things and then you can have public comment. So, this is gonna sound a little pedantic, but
We only get 3 minutes too.
when you're appointed to this planning commission, you are now independent of the board. And you don't have to do what the board says. Unless you do something really awful, they can't get rid of you. So keep that in mind. You're not just a tool for the board. They can suggest most of the time we go along, but you don't have to do what they say. That's one.
Yeah. You're looking at me.
Good advice.
Just to keep it in mind, because, you know, maybe the planning commission has really good views, but the board doesn't. Sometimes things like that happen. Another one is that you get opinions like not in my backyard from the community. You don't have to do what the community says. It's also your responsibility to take the bigger picture and educate and down. So it's a two-way street. To keep that in mind. That's about it. You guys will do great.
Aside from planning commission, what other boards have you been a part of? ZBA, I
I've
believe.
been on the ZBA. I was on the planning commission in the early 90s for 5 years, something like that, until I moved out of the township.
And then you came back.
I've been,
It's awesome.
well, I was in,
They took you back, huh?
yeah.
Well,
Yes.
I'll extend thank you as well. My tenure isn't as long as everybody else's, but my interactions with you I've thoroughly enjoyed and you've done a great job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
And before Howard gets going, because I know he probably has a lot to say, I just want to say thanks as a mentor because obviously, you know, unlike some of the folks here, I haven't been in the township that long. And I know I have a lot to learn about and I'm doing my best and I will continue to, but I really appreciate the guidance and a lot of things we've talked about, obviously, Open Meeting Act not violated in that, but you know, just about the role and how to conduct yourself. And you've been a great role model for that in the, gosh, almost 3 years I've been on. So thank you.
It's not that long already.
2+. I jumped in about, I guess it was about a year into short-term run, maybe six months into that.
Yeah, that was a fun thing to go through.
Yeah, it was.
I'd like to reiterate some of the same comments, Dave. I appreciate your leadership. I like the way you keep a meeting moving. Little do you know that from day one, I kind of observed you and kind of used you as a role model to, you know, how to interact with the public and with the other board members. So appreciate your leadership and
Or throw it
Wish
in.
you well on whatever comes next.
Yeah, I don't,
Also, with my 2 cents,
Thank you.
there's 3 words that I think of when I think of Dave. So knowledge, your knowledge around this topic is incredible. And the second thing is your attention to detail. You find missing commas, you find missing, you always find something and you're very, very detail oriented. That's awesome. But I think what I value the most is a different perspective on things and just a better way, an innovative way. Anything that is better for us, you'll put it out there as a challenge, and I appreciate that.
thank you. Very kind.
I agree with what everyone else has said. Right. I had to. Same thing when I was, in the audience, before I had the opportunity to join the planning commission. But it's been a pleasure being able to, observe, learn, and have the opportunity to serve the community with you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Howard,
Howard, you're up.
Yeah, I sure do.
All right. I don't know if I'm going to be able to say this in 3 minutes, but I'll give it a try.
More than 3 minutes.
Really?
Kristen, you want to start the clock?
Yeah.
You still do work for me. So do you. So I've known Dave as long as I've been here, and I've been here 9 years, almost 9 years. So I've worked with him quite a long time. And you are a man of integrity. You are a man of principle. And what I appreciate the most, this is not the things that I was thinking about, but just in listening to all of the things, what I appreciate the most is that, there are lots of people, there are a lot of people with integrity. There are a lot of people with great values. But you as a leader have been an individual that has lived your values as it relates to your work on the planning commission. And I appreciate that. I mean, you have the integrity and a set of values that you live your life by, and you have tried year after year endlessly to move the needle on things that matter for the community. Okay, whether it's sustainability or the environment, whether it's how the land use of the township is developed, whether it's the around conversations of housing, all of the things that I've had in terms of the last 9 years. One of the things I've been so impressed by is an individual who not only believes something, but tries to bring it back in tangible ways to the community. Thank you. That's true leadership. Some of you may not know this, and there's a lot of history, but Dave stepped up at a time of great turmoil in this office, and at a time of really great turmoil within the Planning Commission, and it could have been worse. Your leadership and that steady approach that you had, and the ability to look past some of the noise, and look to sort of a brighter, more cohesive future with some of the transition that was going on at that time was really something. And I truly appreciate that. I mean, it's not just that, as the manager sitting there and hoping this was all going to come together, but the reality is I don't think the community realizes the level of leadership and that moment that Dave stepped up, and it's really significant. And I want to say thank you for that. I want to say also thank you as a friend, not only just as a colleague, but somebody who I felt safe and comfortable to have really intense conversations with, whether it was around the politics of the township or the things that we were doing or the role of the planning commission or the role of staff, conversations that are not always easy to have. And Dave, you had this ability to, I don't know if you know this, but to be honest and true to yourself in those conversations, but still do so in a way that people felt comfortable being authentic, and people felt comfortable, giving you their full information, or their full sense of what was going on. I mean, you never got defensive. You never sort of shut down the conversation. You were the epitome of a leader that says, you know, there's a light at the end of this tunnel, and we will work through it. And so I want to thank you personally as a friend, and as somebody who I saw as a mentor, and as somebody who I could always go to have those conversations. And that is so critical. And if you've not been the chair of the planning commission, you will begin to realize how intense the job is, and how so integrated the role of chair of the planning commission is with staff and with the work of the township. And I, as somebody, and I think Mika has always felt this way with you as well, has just been an individual we could always go to, and we can always converse with, and we can always have those conversations. So thank you as a friend, as a person. Thank you individually. Thank you from the township's perspective. For your leadership and your service. It was really significant. I'm going to make sure that we do something at the next board meeting. So that will be forthcoming, but that's it. I just thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Wait. Yes?
All the things you say about him, it's not who he is here, it's who he is.
Okay.
The funny thing is, you can actually, I don't know how this works, but you could probably prevent him from leaving, because we don't have another planning commission member lined up. So, I mean, the law says that he doesn't actually leave until we have somebody to replace him. So, I don't know.
That question came up. So. Oh, no.
Adjourn?
I think you could probably just take a picture during.
You can't make that.
We might get.
Let's stand behind it, scoot in.
My kids tell me I don't know how to take pictures, apparently that's changed.
You're taking off.
That's what I say, but. Teenagers, oh, you got another one? Oh, it had it.
So are we all going to get drunk now? Anyway, everybody has.
You know.
Yeah. Once again, this already, that's great for the proverbial. And, motion to adjourn.
Second or third?
Oh, your last gavel.